I know that the senator from Ohio cares about the billionaires. We care about average working people. I yield the floor.
So just to be clear, Ms. President.
Was recognized.
So just to be clear, what you heard from the minority leader was the following. I just want to recap it for those of you who might have missed. Number one, he acknowledged that the Democrats have actually not put forward a written proposal that people could look at. I was going to ask him before he stormed out of the room, because evidently he doesn't want to hear any opposing views or actually engage in meaningful negotiation. He would have heard me ask the next question. If he had stayed, I would have asked him a third question. Does he want these monies to go directly to insurance companies? Let me repeat that, Madam President, because I don't think the American people have been told the truth here. This money does not go to people on Obamacare. This is a check written from the federal government to the wealthiest insurance companies on the planet.
Okay, well, this is a big update and frankly, very welcome news for Republicans in the government shutdown battle. They're finally playing smart politics. I love to see it because as I posed in yesterday's video, when it comes to these Obamacare tax subsidies that the Democrats are withholding government funding over and claiming, oh, your premiums are going to go up if we don't get rid of this corporate socialism, I stated I think this is the perfect time for Republicans to actually present their own solution when it comes to healthcare, right? Stop letting the Democrats outflank us on this issue. You know, I think the American public has this perception, oh, Democrats are the party of healthcare, when in reality, no. It is their failed experiment known as Obamacare that is the actual reason, right, why health insurance is so expensive. Not only do we need to make that clear to people, now is the perfect time as they're, doing a government shutdown over healthcare to actually say, here's the Republican response that is actually going to sit there and help people. And the other reason, secondly, why I think that's so important is because I pointed out, right? So while the system overall is a failure, the problem is that if Republicans basically just let these tax credits expire and then don't do anything about it, right? Don't present an alternative, better solution, that for a certain cohort of mostly working class Americans, not all, but for a certain number, right? Basically, their premiums are going to go up next year. And then what are Democrats going to say in the 2026 midterms? Oh, Republicans raise your healthcare costs. So that's why I said, right, this is also important that Republicans don't just reopen the government or force something through. You should also try to solve healthcare so that way, again, we can take what is basically the most popular issue for the Democrat Party, put that in the Republican camp. That is exactly why this morning President Trump presented his own solution to this whole battle over Obamacare that we'll explain today, and it is essentially to put these subsidies temporarily in the hands of Americans and not the insurance companies, and hopefully use that as a off-ramp, right? A gradual getting off of Obamacare, so that way I hope, right, we can transition to an actual more free market solution, right? Not corporate socialism that makes healthcare more expensive for everybody. We'll explain that, but I also want to show you what happened when Chuck Schumer was like, oh shoot, no longer can we grandstand about healthcare, right? Because now the Republicans are calling our bluff and essentially saying, no, your solution literally again makes healthcare more expensive. Here is our solution. And that is exactly why in a debate with Senator Bernie Moreno over this very issue today, as he got called out on his lies, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer essentially stormed off the floor. So we'll explain for you again the Trump solution to Obamacare and much more in today's video. So guys, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is not only the best way to support our work, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And with that said, okay, so just to really briefly recap for you, although maybe it won't be so brief because it's kind of a complicated issue to explain. But what are these Obamacare tax credits / subsidies? Well, it's worth noting, this is money that's not given to Americans, but rather given to insurance companies, right? The Democrats claim we're fighting back against big pharma and the insurance companies, as of course they bankroll them and yes, give them a corporate socialism. But basically, this is designed to make healthcare cheaper because again, the government is subsidizing it for a narrow cohort of Americans, right? Basically, if you're in the working class bracket, anywhere from like $20,000 to $60,000, maybe $80,000, depending on how many kids you have and all this stuff, right? You can receive basically overall cheaper premiums than everyone else because, again, the government is basically subsidizing that through the insurance companies. And by the way, this only applies to marketplace healthcare. So that, in other words, means you're not getting it through your employer, which probably most Americans do. Maybe you're an independent contractor, you don't work, your job doesn't have health insurance, whatever it is. And so that's, who that applies to, which I don't know how necessarily common it is in the working class. Definitely you have like construction contractors, maybe people with their own companies, things like that. But just so you understand, right, this is basically what we're dealing with. However, the, of course, core issue with the entire tax credit system is what? Because the government has been subsidizing healthcare for a certain narrow group of Americans, in the process, the Obamacare tax credits have been raising the cost of health insurance for everyone else.
Yeah, it's one of the key reasons that we have continued to be able to push back on what Chuck Schumer is trying to be able to peddle. He's saying, hey, let's just do a one-year extension of these Obamacare subsidies. And the general media gets out there and says, that sounds so reasonable. But what they're really saying is send $40 billion straight to insurance companies that some of them have had between 500 and 1,000% increase in their stock just since the time of Obamacare. So they're saying send all this money to insurance companies and it'll be fine. What the Democrats are not saying is it's pumping money to insurance companies, not to people to be able to help. It's only for about 20 million people, the select group that they have picked. It's not the general population line. Most people's insurance rates are going to continue to go up. Democrats are only trying to subsidize a certain group of folks. It's also funding directly towards abortion. And Democrats won't say this. This was their end around to be able to fund elective abortions by sending money to insurance company, then allowing the insurance to be able to cover abortions as well. So the dutiful media just continues to be able to say this sounds so reasonable from Chuck Schumer, but the belie that.
Right. So again, that's why it's very important to be clear to people about what Democrats are actually protecting. They're not trying to fight for you. They're trying to fight for subsidies and corporate socialism for the so-called greedy insurance companies themselves to, again, basically maybe lower costs sort of for a small cohort of Americans, but for everyone else, drastically raising the costs. And just so we're clear, right? And so we understand this, why exactly did Obamacare raise healthcare premiums for so many freaking people? Well, there's a number of ways we could explain this. We could, first of all, go to the classic supply and demand curve that some of you guys might remember from school. And what happens, right, when you put in government subsidies, when the government pumps money into something, that actually it artificially increases the amount of demand, which guess what, right? Raises the price. But if you don't want to get into the realm of like curves and theoretical economics, we could just apply this practically and point out to people that what did Obamacare do? Added a bunch of government subsidies, a bunch of new mandates and regulations in terms of health insurance has to cover this, this, and that. So no longer can you really customize your coverage as much. And as a result of all of that, what happened, right? The costs went up. The same is true, by the way, if you want to test that theory again with the Biden economy and COVID era inflation, right? Essentially what happened is the government put a bunch of fake stimulus money into the economy. And as a result, right, you saw, remember when the world opened back up, a bunch of overconsumption, right? People were buying way too much stuff. They're maxing out their freaking credit cards, going on all these trips, right? So demand was going up. And then guess what happened? Because of that government subsidy that artificially for a short time, right, was boosting the economy. But then, right, you're seeing the consequences of it now. It can't last that long. But yes, inflation, aka prices, went up. And so here is the issue, okay, as I presented basically to the Republicans. Obviously, these tax credits need to go, okay, and Obamacare as a whole basically needs to go. You need to get the government subsidies, largely speaking, out of health insurance, and if that happens, as you can tell, right, that will actually lower the cost of people's premiums. The only issue where Democrats are basically holding us politically hostage, and this is also a concern of mine, is, again, for those 20 million Americans, yes, by next year, in the short term, it will raise their insurance costs. Now, I would guess that over time, it's going to basically lower everyone's premiums because, again, that's what happens when you take the subsidies out of it. But you need to find the off-ramp, right? The temporary solution, so that way, these people can kind of have a transition period and they're not going to be screaming at the Republicans in the midterms, right? You raise my health insurance or whatever. And that is exactly why President Trump is offering the solution today to basically temporarily take the money that we were giving, again, to the corporate socialism, to the insurance companies, and instead saying, okay, we'll give that money directly or put it into an account basically for the 20 million Americans who were benefiting from those subsidies, and then allow them to use that to purchase what very likely long-term will be better health insurance. And again, that can be their off-ramp to, over time, just not dealing with Obamacare as a whole to begin with. So this is what he put out on Truth Social, as you can read it. I am recommending to Senate Republicans that hundreds of billions of dollars currently being sent to money-sucking insurance companies in order to save the bad health care provided by Obamacare be sent directly to the people so that they can purchase their own much better health care and have money left over. There you go, right? In other words, take from the big bad insurance companies, give it to the people, and terminate per dollar spent the worst healthcare anywhere in the world, Obamacare. Yes, it's important to repeat, the approach that the Democrats tried here raised health insurance costs and made coverage worse for basically everyone. Unrelated, but we must still terminate the filibuster, which I would support in principle. But I don't think the Senate Republicans, frankly, are going to do that second part. They love the filibuster for the very reasons that it basically is an excuse for them to not actually pass meaningful legislation. And the thing about abolishing the filibuster is you're basically taking the nuclear option, right? The Democrats are going to do it back to you. So if you abolish the filibuster, you have to basically blitz conservative legislation. You basically have to change America to a degree where the Democrats can't realistically take power ever again. And do the Senate Republicans have the courage to do that? No, not necessarily. But this is actually a good solution to the problem, right? The first one. And this is something realistically maybe you could get Senate Republicans and maybe even a handful of Senate Democrats to agree to and basically move all of that forward. Because again, the Americans who are affected by losing the tax credits will basically get a bailout temporarily while they need to find new health insurance. Now, I'm sure some really hardcore fiscal conservatives are going to say, no, we shouldn't have any form of subsidy, right? We shouldn't be giving out free money to anyone. But again, the issue politically is, right? You have to think practically about this too. You need to have an off-ramp solution, right? If you just cut off those people from health insurance overnight, that's going to be super unpopular. They're going to get mad at you. There's going to be a political whiplash. So again, Republicans need to have a way to get off of Obamacare while also having a transition period so that way it's popular with the American people instead of unpopular. I think this idea, especially going into the midterms, right? They keep playing all the dirty tricks with us. Oh, let's shut down the government for the election. Let's have the EBT and SNAP voters go out. Now they're going to try to weaponize healthcare. Do it back to them, right? Weaponize healthcare against them. And then hopefully long term, this is again the off-ramp for a better, more free market solution. So that's exactly why I say this is just such a brilliant idea, and I absolutely support it, right? Do not go forward with the failed Obamacare tax credits. Figure out a way to wean people off of them and make that practical and realistic and doable and politically popular. I think most of these working class Americans, the 20 million, would much rather see the money in their own account and then they can choose their own health insurance than they would supposedly getting at cheaper premiums, but it's still really not all that cheap. And all they know is, oh, it was expensive before, it got more expensive. This is how you both play good politics, but also long term play good economics and play genuinely good healthcare policy as well. So I'm a big fan of this. This is genius. I think, by the way, this is the ultimate solution because now you're going to force a Democrat's hand, right? They've been claiming, oh, Republicans don't care about healthcare. We need to extend these sucky tax credits that I also do think it's a genuine question. Why didn't you do them before? Republicans are now saying, no, we have our own solution. It's better, and it puts money directly in the hands of the American people, not the greedy insurance companies that Chuck Schumer and I guess previously Barack Obama are basically bought off by. What you gonna do now, liberals? What you gonna say? Let's find out, right? You actually go on X right now. Many of them are trying to now defend the insurance companies. It's like, oh, how very liberal of you, right? Here's another great chart, by the way, shown by Donald J. Trump on Truth Social. And I repeat, The biggest winners of Obamacare, frankly, yes, were the insurance companies who are just getting these free subsidies and also raising costs, right? They're walking away with a ton of money. Now, who knows these days, because hospitals also are charging so much. Maybe the insurance companies are struggling on the back end, but obviously the whole system's broken. But anyways, major health insurance company stock performances after Obamacare from March 2010 to November 2025. Okay, United Healthcare went up 1,100%, basically, almost 1,200%. Cigna, 800%. Anthem Blue Cross, 400%, right? Humana, almost 500%. Molina, 800%, right? So in other words, what? The insurance companies walked away big time and screwed over the American people. And no, that is not capitalism. That is not the greedy, corrupt Republicans. That is Democrat Obama policy, right? Democrats, the so-called party of the average man, at least historically, that's the way they frame themselves. This is exactly what they did. They allowed the greedy insurance companies to screw over the freaking American people. And now that we're saying we want to bring some degree of competition to the market, of course, that's such a problem. By the way, great video right here that demonstrates to all the Obamacare defenders, because this is basically what Democrats always fight the hardest for in the Senate, that you guys, again, failed every time you touch healthcare. So don't try to lecture us that you have the solution. You don't.
It will actually reduce the deficit by $4 trillion over the long term. Reducing the waste and inefficiency in Medicare and Medicaid will pay for most of this plan. It will slow the growth of healthcare costs for our families, our businesses, and our government. There will be a provision in this plan that requires us to come forward with more spending cuts if the savings we promised don't materialize.
Right, but supposedly this is the party of good healthcare policy. Democrats insist to us that it's the greedy Republicans who are destroying healthcare. Absolutely not. But do you know the reason why Democrats poll way ahead, like 20 points ahead of Republicans on healthcare issues? As if people were sincere, they should genuinely think, ever since Obamacare, my healthcare went way more expensive, right? But the problem is that Republicans historically have not presented an alternative solution to the problem. I think, for instance, of even the government shutdown debate thus far, where it's basically keep the subsidies or remove the subsidies. Republicans aren't saying here's an alternative to the subsidies. Now Trump is saying that. And this is something that, if played correctly, can absolutely break the Democrats. And I think that's what you saw perfectly play out here on the Senate floor, where now that Republicans actually have a solution that is way better than the Democrat solution, Senator Chuck Schumer can't actually handle it. He can't demand exactly why he wants to maintain the failed status quo on healthcare, right? Now you see where this is going, because historically, the Democrat argument was Republicans want to maintain a broken healthcare system. We want to fix it, right? But the broken healthcare system of 2025 is a Democrat one. Now Republicans are the ones saying, we actually want to fix it. Why are you trying to defend the insurance companies, Chuck Schumer, right? Why are you trying to keep the status quo of high healthcare costs on basically everyone? And take a look at what happens next the moment that Trump has injected this idea into the hive mind, essentially, of the Republican Party.
Have you put forward a proposal that we can read that you referenced in your speech, where it says a clean continuing resolution with the extension of the ACA Biden COVID credits?
Yes, as we spoke yesterday.
So there is
I will not be interrupted.
No, my question is there a proposal in writing that we can read?
There is a proposal that is very simple. First, you haven't put your proposed fix to the ACA, the new one, which Leader Thune has spoken about on the floor, so we can't give you a counter in writing, but it's very simple.
So you don't have a proposal in writing, Chuck Schumer. Now, the reason Republicans don't is because we just came up with it today, okay? You guys, for what, how long has it gone now? 40 days, something like that? Have been saying you're shutting down the government over Obamacare tax credits, and you don't even, now 40 whatever days into this, you still don't have a plan in writing in terms of what you actually want? Brilliant, guys. The Democrat Party for you. It's really astonishing to watch.
Because we have two sentences we would add to any proposal, which would extend the ACA benefits for 1 year. That's all, plain and simple. And the leader can put that in his proposal on opening up the government.
Yeah, and we repeat, as we said yesterday, why do they want to only extend it for 1 year? sounds so moderate, right? No, it's because they know in October 2026, those 20 million Americans who benefit from the subsidies are going to get a letter or email basically saying, starting in 2027, your health insurance premium is going to increase. And then guess what? Midterms, the Republicans' healthcare, blah, blah, blah. So obviously Republicans are not going to accept that. They're very smart for not falling for this garbage. Okay, it's not a moderate solution. It's actually the worst possible one. And now Democrats, we broke their brain because we're presenting a much better solution to Obamacare.
So it doesn't need a vote. It can't be blocked by anybody. It's the right thing to do.
It still have no income caps, so people who make $1 million, $2, $3 million a
As
year.
we said, if he would have listened to my speech yesterday, once we passed the one-year fix, so people right now aren't in difficulty, we would sit and negotiate that. The leader has said he won't negotiate before. We're willing to negotiate once the credits are extended, plain and simple. And we made that in our proposal yesterday.
So for 1 year, people making millions of dollars would still receive these COVID-era subsidies?
The bottom line is the senator from Ohio ignores that 99% of people, you want to hurt people making $10,000, $50,000, $90,000 and hold this up? We can fix what the gentleman said in a negotiation, but don't have people who are every day being hurt by paying thousands of dollars more that they can't afford. I know that the senator from Ohio cares about the billionaires. We care about average working people.
When you guys literally, right, are defending subsidies for big insurance companies. If you care about the working people, why don't you want to put the money in the hands of the working people? Actually, then the working people can freaking use the money. No, instead you're subsidizing corporate socialism, which, by the way, you know how we know it's failed, right? You know how we know the subsidies did not bring down the costs that the insurance companies are selling to the American people? Because the cost of insurance, yes, we know, went up. So clearly your subsidies backfired in the very way they were intended to work. Again, and if you don't believe me, it's that very basic concept of supply and demand and what happens when the demand curve shifts right, okay? Chuck Schumer, you went to school, did you? Right? I don't know.
I yield the floor.
So just to be clear, Mr. President,
And he just walks
so
off.
just to be clear, what you heard from the minority leader was the following. I just want to recap it for those of you who might have missed. Number one, he acknowledged that the Democrats have actually not put forward a written proposal that people could look at. Number two, he acknowledged that his plan would be to allow millionaires, let me just say that clearly, people making millions of dollars would receive Biden-era COVID Obamacare subsidies. You heard that right. No income cap. I was going to ask him before he stormed out of the room, because evidently he doesn't want to hear any opposing views or actually engage in meaningful negotiation. He would have heard me ask the next question, Madam President, which is, would he continue $0 premiums, which we know for a fact have enormous levels of fraud? If he had stayed, I would have asked him a third question. Does he want these monies to go directly to insurance companies? Let me repeat that,
yes,
Madam President, because I don't think the American people have been told the truth here. This money does not go to people on Obamacare. This is a check written from the federal government to the wealthiest insurance companies on the planet. He wants no income caps, millionaires getting COVID subsidies. He wants $0 premiums that are filled with fraud. And he wants to enrich insurance companies even more.
Boom, exactly. And why does Chuck Schumer walk off the floor? Because he can't handle the truth. He doesn't want people to see that. He doesn't have a response. Because all this talk about the billionaires, the Republicans want to benefit the billionaires. Who do you think Obamacare was designed to help? It certainly doesn't help people, because everyone's health insurance is more expensive, actually. But who are you subsidizing while raising the cost of health insurance? What is the government giving money to? It's not the people, so that way they can have money in their pocket to pay for their own health insurance, right? A subsidy that would actually go to the people. Maybe it's not the best idea long term, but hey, that's what Trump is saying in the short term temporarily to do. No, they want to continue corporate socialism for the insurance companies. Many such cases, by the way, right? So-called party of the working class. Yeah, totally. It's not like Obama surrendered to the medical industrial complex a million freaking times when he was writing Obamacare. No, certainly not. We're the working man's party. We want to save your health care. Oh, what health care? What health care are you saving, Democrats? You mean the one that in the past decade for basically every American has gotten more expensive and the quality of coverage has gone down? That very amazing health care, right? You know? Yeah. Well, that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. And do you think that Trump's solution is a good, again, off-ramp to basically salvage the midterms and not have a disaster and help out the people so that way they can transition off of Obamacare, but to also, right, long-term, get off of Obamacare and the failed system of subsidies? Let me know. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.